And so, welcome to Talking Timber today. It's with me, Mike Jeffrey.
And Keith Fryer.
And today, our Talking Timber is one of our guest slots where we talk to figures from across the trade about current issues and topics affecting the wood sector, the challenges, but also the opportunities.
And today, I'm really pleased to say that we're talking to Nils Peterson. Nils is well known to me. We've known each other quite a while now, and he's been a great supporter of different things that I've done in my work in the trade associations. Nils is secretary of the leading trade representative body, the European Timber Trade Federation. He's also head of foreign trade at the German Trade Association, GD Holz. And the topic we're going to be hearing his views on is European Union deforestation regulation, which has a rather handy acronym of EUDR. There's plenty more to it than this, but the essential aim of the regulation is to reduce and ultimately stop EU trade contributing to global deforestation. It covers not just timber and wood products, but also 6 other so-called forest and ecosystem risk commodities. And these are beef, cattle, coffee, cocoa, palm oil, soya, and rubber.
Yeah, and the EUDR states that companies placing any of these commodities or their derivatives on the EU market must undertake due diligence to minimise the risk their production is implicated in deforestation or the rather more nebulous forest degradation. As part of this, they must provide the geolocation coordinates to the plot of land where commodities originated. Breaches can be punished by fines and even jail sentences. It's a big ask for the EU timber trade, but also the UK wood sector. The UK is one of the biggest timber importers in the world, and most of our imports come from the EU. And under the EUDR, exporters from the EU must also comply with its due diligence requirements.
Yeah. Moreover, the UK finished wood product manufacturers who export to the EU must comply. So they're going to need all the due diligence and geolocation information from their timber suppliers.
And just how big an ask the EUDR is that pending approval by the EU Parliament in November, implementation will now be pushed back a year from the end of December this year to the end of 2025, with small to medium-sized enterprises not having to comply until summer 2026.
Yeah, that's quite a big introduction, Neil. So, I mean, again, thanks for having you on board. The question I wanted to just sort of start off by asking you is, that's the EUDR very much in a nutshell. Can we start with a slightly broader question? Wearing your ETTF Secretary General hat, do you approve of the introduction of EUDR and think it's the right law at the right time?
Yeah, hi Keith and Mike. First of all, big thanks to both of you for having me as a guest on this podcast. It's a big honor for me to speak to all your audience. And like Keith said, we've known ourselves for quite a while, and it also shows that there still are ties between the UK and the EU.
Precisely,
and,
exactly.
Now, perhaps after this, thank you. Back to the question. Basically, yes, we do totally approve, and so does our members, both in Germany and both on EU levels, such as the ETTF with member companies, member federations in 12 EU states. So, I mean, of course, we do approve, and how could we not? Seeing the overall aim of the regulation is stopping imported deforestation or imported forest degradation. That is without a doubt an aim that we all want to achieve, and our members do so as well. The tricky part is how is the regulation being implemented? Basically, it shows a trend that the EU has throughout the last 10 or so or 15 years. They formulate an aim, but they don't say precisely how this aim is supposed to be achieved. Basically, the aim of the EUDR is stopping imported deforestation or forest degradation, but they don't tell you how. And this how is what the whole thing gets. What gets the whole thing so tricky. So from a legislative point of view, we are disapproving strongly to how it's being implemented, and also to the level of help being given to our members and from Brussels. There is this implementation is basically where the difficulties start. It's all the practical questions that are still remaining open, and I mean, if I think the EUDR has some 30 or 35 or so paragraphs, if I'm not mistaken, and we're already at 120 questions in the FAQ document that had to be asked and answered by the European Commission in order to fill the whole regulation with life and make it applicable, so to speak. And this shows that to a large extent, the EUDR was not made very well from a legislative point of view. It stipulated an aim, but it didn't tell you how to do so, which is now being done with a tremendous FAQ, and by tremendous I mean big, not necessarily good. So that is where the difficulties start. So basically, yes, we do fully approve of the EUDR when it comes to the aim, but we strongly disapprove when it comes to the actual application of the regulation and so many unanswered questions.
Yeah, I mean, in my world, where I tend to sort of be, my day job is supplying timber products to the building industry. It's the building industry should be what's called design and build, and what we often see is build and then design it afterwards. And it seems a bit like that's what's happened with EUDR. It's a great idea, and it's a very, very supportable idea. But yeah, sorry, Mike, I'm interrupting you.
Yeah, Nils, what would you say? I mean, you've covered it to an extent, but what would you say are the main challenges to the European timber trade? Is it the due diligence side of things? Is it defining what, getting a definition of what forest degradation means, and then there's the geolocation requirements. I mean, they're all quite demanding requirements, aren't they?
Yeah, that's true, and many of those requirements are not defined yet as to when this requirement can be, when a particular requirement can be seen as fulfilled. Yeah. For example, the consent of indigenous parties to logging, yes. For example. How do you approve that consent was given as a criteria in the EUDR? Are you supposed to visit indigenous people technically ask them whether their consent was given to certain logging practices in their country? My green heart would say yes, you have to, because it's their country, it's their forest, and so on and so forth. But for a timber importer's point of view, it's completely absurd that this question needs to be answered on a business point of view. That is something that needs to be answered on a local and national body. I mean, every country should reflect the rights of indigenous people. We're in the 21st century, so their rights need to be protected, that's for sure. And it also shows that the European Commission was not very... They were very aware of the criteria that this is a question that needs to be asked, but the answer shouldn't be coming from importers, from my point of view. It should be addressed on a political level between the EU and supplier countries. This is just one example I can give, but there's many others in the EUDR where the actual application or fulfillment is just so difficult from an importer's point of view. Because the answers how it's supposed to be fulfilled are not given yet. Yeah. So one of the main challenges is linked to this. It's basically getting information from suppliers and supplying countries, and also getting this information through the entire supply chain, where we all know that these supply chains aren't as simple as we imagine. They are complicated. There's many stakeholders involved. Material gets mixed. Material gets transferred into other material. So a lot of the information easily gets lost along the supply chain, but still it has to arrive at the importer's point where the due diligence needs to be assessed. And I do see a little bit of a shift of many supplying countries. Many of them are basically saying we are ready, we are EUDR ready, we got our systems in place, but I also fear that trade flows might be diverted away from the EU because it becomes such a sensitive market, and there's other markets in the world that don't ask so many questions, and they say pay the same price for materials. So again, the aim of the EUDR is quite clear, but we have to be very careful by implementing it in a robust way, that we are not simply shifting illegal logging or the products of illegal logging or of the consequences of deforestation to other buying countries, basically.
Have the ETTF and GD Holt's members, you're obviously closely in touch with them. Are they voicing lots of concerns back to you, or are they pretty relaxed about it, ready? I mean, where are they on the page with this, Nils?
No, there is a lot of inquiries, both from German Timber Trade Federation members towards us, but also from the other ETTF members. We have quite a well-established EUDR working group where a couple of ETTF members are present, and we're basically exchanging views, exchanging information and knowledge about this whole thing, because one thing that is quite clear, and also it became quite clear from an EUDR point of view.
That was the EU timber regulation.
Point of view, the best regulation in the EU is worth nothing if it's not implemented in an equal and harmonized way. And the EUDR has shown quite drastically that it's not implemented equally. Luckily, the EU has foreseen a mechanism in the EUDR which basically tells competent authorities how much they need to control on a national level, and it also formulated a legal punishment if they don't, also to the members they are supposed to control. So this is good. There has been progress, but I see it won't be implemented as harmonized as I wish it would be. And coming back to the question, yes, they are still voicing concerns, and we as a German Trade Federation, we're basically working on it since 3 years, almost, more or less. And if I had no other fields of work like CITES or phytosanitary issues and customs-related questions, for example, I still wouldn't have been bored. So it shows that the EUDR is quite
it's a meaty subject.
Breathtaking.
Yeah. And the EUDR, of course, you referred to the EUTR, where there were issues with less effective implementation in some countries than others, and more sort of strict implementation in others. But I've got a question about there's one other thing that it's been raised in my work and my reporting on the EUDR has been the IT side of things, the platform that the EU is establishing for companies to upload their due diligence information and to validate the imports again. That has been a problem, hasn't it? I mean, it hasn't been sorted out as quickly or as far in advance of the regulation being implemented as it should have been, has it?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, the European Commission is only now providing trainings, basically train the trainer on this information system. And if we would not have the proposed postponement of the EUDR, so the entry into application by 1 year, we'd be basically 2 months away from the actual application. It is in force already, so it's just the application that is being suggested to be postponed. But the information system is, as far as I know, more or less up and running now. And they have recently, like a week ago or so, started to train the people that are supposed to use the information system.
Yeah.
But this should have been, from my point of view, or from our point of view, this should have been done a long time ago, so that companies can adapt, and also companies need to implement this system into their own warehouse and ERP systems, or at least connect it so that you can avoid double work. And I mean, the software can be brilliant, or an information system can be brilliant. If people don't know how to use it, then it's worth nothing. So here also the Commission was way behind schedule, like they were with the FAQ or the guidelines and other things. And this then leads to private companies, for example, trying to imitate this information system, or providing due diligence systems, which is a major market for consultants and the like. But in the end, this only reflects or trickles down to the price of timber. If companies have to use such expensive systems, they have to raise the bar for their price tag on their timber, because the administration behind having timber on the European market becomes way more expensive through using such consultants, for example.
You were talking earlier about the task facing suppliers to provide the relevant information for EUDR compliance. I mean, is there a risk? I mean, you were saying some will perhaps sort of think, well, Europe is not worth the administrative kind of hassle. Shall we sell somewhere else where they have less kind of concerns about the environmental impact of forestry and timber? I mean, is there a danger that the EU's kind of pool of suppliers of timber might sort of shrink as a result of the EU deforestation regulation?
It's hard to say at the moment, because that question can indeed only be answered after we have the EUDR for, say, 2 or 3 years. We from my personal point of view, but basically to at least give a little bit of an answer, or try one. I do think there is the risk, yes, strongly, of trade flows being diverted away from the EU, because it is such a sensitive market. And I mean, sensitive basically, yes, in a good way, but if sensitivity turns into a market being impossible to place your products on, then of course suppliers worldwide will choose a different market that is less sensitive and easier to place their products on. And that indeed is the case. From my point of view, the EUDR is mostly welcomed by our members, both in Germany and the EU, but it does not necessarily incorporate international supplying countries into basically when the regulation was formed. It did not incorporate their views into making a regulation that is applicable also from a supplier's country point of view. It's strongly aimed at guarding the European market, which is, I think, understandable from a European legislative point of view, but it's quite a diplomatic slap in the face to a lot of producing countries and to a lot of the operators and traders within the EU that have to apply the law. So yes, I do see the risk of trade flows being diverted away from the EU.
Yeah. Just picking on North America, well, the USA in particular, we were sort of talking about this here earlier, and just with AHEC, the American Hardwood Export Council. Are they giving you a hard time? Or not you specifically, but in terms of EUDR? Because, I mean, they've got an enormous number of private forest owners. So all of this sort of geolocation information, everything they're expected to do. How are they facing this? Are they finding this difficult, or what's the feedback?
Yeah, I think they're finding this very difficult, which is completely understandable because of their forestry ownership being so so scattered, it pretty much compares to the ownership of forests in Germany. I mean, we have several millions of forest owners as well, and many of them own less than 5 hectares. So tiny patches of forest everywhere, and very often people don't even know that they own a forest or half a hectare, or 5 hectares or whatsoever. They just happen to know it's somewhere, but they don't know where it is, for example. And I think it's from an ownership point of view, it's quite comparable to the US. And I think AHEC has done something very, very correct by taking it into their own hands and designing an approach of how to fulfill EUDR criteria. And as far as I know, regarding the geo-referentiation or geolocation data, they are able and willing to provide data on a county level. So not on a single plot of land or a single plot of forestry level, but rather on a county level. And this to me is I think it's a very good idea. And I mean, at the moment they're overly concerned, which probably I would be as well if I was an American hardware producer or software producer, just alike. I think in the end, as soon as the EU has published the country benchmarking system, the United States will be upgraded basically from a standard risk to a low risk origin.
Yes.
And having achieved this step, timber from the US will be much easier to import to the EU than it might be with the standard risk. Not knowing the details of standard risk and low risk and high risk countries to the very maximum, but I think we all agree on the fact that Canada and the US, for example, won't be seen as high risk countries, let alone standard risk neither. So. I think once this country benchmarking is out, I don't think exports from the US will face major challenges when entering the EU under the regulation.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And the European Timber Trade Federation and GD Holtz were both among the timber sector bodies that pressed for a delay on the introduction of the EUDR, which now hopefully you've got an extra 12 months. It gives the trade breathing space to adapt, but what would you like to see from the EU in facilitating compliance in that extra year that we've now got?
We complained about the EUDR because it was so unapplicable and because there were so many open questions remaining after it was released or published or it went into force even. And what the regulation does foresee is a transition period or a transition phase for the traders and importers that are affected by it. And our argument was a long time that this transition period cannot start until the help and helping leverage in the EUDR is fully available to the traders and importers. And in this, we've had three criteria. One was the already mentioned country benchmarking, which was not ready. The second was the FAQ, which to a large extent for a long time was not ready. And the third was the guidelines that the EUDR foresees. These 3 instruments weren't ready. So our point of view was that the transition point cannot start. It can only start when these 3 elements are ready and available to operators. So we were strongly pressing for a postponement because, I mean, our importers are willing to learn, but they can't learn when they don't know what to learn. And these 3 elements were basically forming the background of the things they need to learn and apply in order to learn to comply and learn to fill the EUDR with life in a nutshell. So sorry, does that answer your question?
Oh, definitely, yes, very much.
Yeah, I was just going to ask here that, let's work on the basis that this is going to be implemented, and hopefully that in alone means that it's not going to adversely impact the timber trade. Do you think there's going to be some real benefits for us as an industry or a sector by using EUDR as a sort of marketing tool?
I think yes. Basically, yes. If I want to be critical about this or critical about my yes, then I think it'll take a significant amount of time until it trickles down.
Yes.
I mean, some of our importers and traders or members in ETTF are already saying this is a very good instrument for marketing timber, and basically it helps us to demonstrate not only legality of the timber origin, but also the fact that this product did not contribute to the loss of worldwide forests. This basically is a marketing leverage or lever per se, but it'll take some time. At the moment, our companies are very much affected by the additional layer of administrative burden that the EUDR brings along, and many aspects in this burden are not clear how to tackle them. So basically, you can compare it to a machine that is busy choking because you're starting it since a long time. Once you have the machine, once it is up and running, I think there will be opportunities for the timber traders and operators to demonstrate that this contributes to a good thing, basically, and then this will also trickle down to the end consumer, basically by saying, hey, if I buy timber instead of other building materials, I'm not only contributing to a greener environment since it stores a lot of carbon, but I'm also not contributing to worldwide deforestation. So I think yes, but it'll take some time, and also some time for the actual operator to realize that it can be used as such an instrument. Perhaps one more remark I would like to point out to the previous question is I'm basically a huge fan of the FLEC-T process, which started 15, 20 or so years ago, initiated by the European Commission. And I think to those who are familiar with the process, I think it's easy to say that it is extremely beneficial for both exporters from supplying countries and also European importers, because it is a process on governmental level.
Yes.
So, for example, Indonesia has fulfilled this, and now under the EUDR, Indonesia's timber products have a green lane to enter the EU. Excellent. This is magnificent work, and we also see a lot of progress in many African countries where deforestation is partly still an issue. And in this process, those countries have achieved large steps, large milestones to combat their own deforestation, and they're finally they're seeing the benefits of the forest, and not just through this process. Of course, they have seen that before, but it was so valuable to have. And here, I think the European Commission has made a major mistake by not giving this FLEC-T process a larger recognition in the EUDR. Same accounts for forest certification or sustainability certification, for example, or CITES, the Washington Convention of Trade in Endangered Species. These instruments are already there. They are already in place. So why not incorporate them into a new legislation such as the EUDR? I know there's legal barriers and hindrances to it, but I can't get my head around it why they did not incorporate this to a larger extent. And I just hope that many competent authorities in the EU will pay a greater attention to products that are certified, for example, as for obvious reasons. It should be easier for those products to conduct due diligence. And I hope competent authorities have a very practical approach on this. Perhaps also then being in a little bit of a conflict or gray zone with the European Commission, but I think that totally is a risk worth taking.
Yeah, thank you.
So, I mean, preventing deforestation is about as well as policing your market and stopping this stuff coming in. There is scope for regions like the EU and countries like the UK to actually support the supplier countries in implementing sustainable legality forestry governance. That's as important part as well as policing your own market. That is very important.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Sorry, was there a question, Mike?
Yeah, sort of. Yes.
I think it's more a statement. I think it's more a statement.
That's me opinionizing. Yeah.
Okay.
But
I was wondering if the line was bad, and I
No.
didn't get the question. But yes, I totally underline that the EU should have made way more efforts in the past to get more VPAs going and then implement them stronger in the EUDR. That for me would have been a way more coherent approach than unilaterally basically putting an end to VPAs and making a new legislation, which also is a diplomatic punch in the face of all those countries that have invested largely into the VPAs already. And you can see that with Indonesia, you can see it with Ghana and many other African countries, but also South American countries. And those major steps that have been taken there, they are not being reflected, or at least not to my understanding, and to an adequate value, not being reflected in the EUDR. And that, to me, is not just a diplomatic blow in the face, but also very unpractical from an importer's point of view, and a major fault I see in the EUDR. So, I mean, the Commission has already invested so much money. Why stop it now? They should have come to the conclusion we need more VPAs to make international markets and trade flows into the EU more beneficial.
Thanks. We're going to have to wrap up now, but I just want to say thank you very much indeed. An observation I've always felt with this is, and don't get me wrong, I see EUTR, EUDR, the whole FLEGT system as all being actually great positives for the planet and you know and trading and giving people, as you said, security. But it's more sort of an observation. It's not a question. But from my side, I've just scratched my head and say, where's chain of custody or EUDR or in terms of oil and other products? You know, I mean, we get pushed. I'm not saying we're pushed under a bus, but we're put under a microscope in terms of what we do. Yet other competing materials, steel and all the rest of it, seem to get away scot-free. It just seems weird.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, those sectors that you mentioned. I mean, if you apply the same amount of scrutiny than what we have in the timber sector to other building materials, they would have a hard time to comply.
Exactly.
But it is automatically being asked by the timber industry, and now rubber and soy and cocoa and the like. But one of our members actually summed it up quite nicely once. There is no other building material being stronger regulated than timber.
Yeah.
Imagine that. And even though it is the most finest material when it comes to sustainability and carbon capture and the like, and another importer that is very active in African countries is always pointing towards minerals for extraction. For example, the extraction of minerals such as ores or gold and also precious stones or rare earths, for example, like lithium and the like. These materials, they add to a large extent to a loss of biodiversity and also to forested areas. And those of us that have seen mining in African countries and also in South American countries, that is evil. And I'm totally with you, Keith, when it comes to the regulation of these sectors. That should be seen with the same through the same microscope as timber is.
Yeah. Sorry, I think we're going to have to wrap up, aren't we? But sorry, Mike.
Well, I was going to say perhaps, you know, the EUDR does, to an extent, in the fact that it covers all these other commodities, it gives the timber industry possibly a platform to say, actually, although we're covered by the EUDR, we are the one industry amongst those which actually incentivizes maintaining forest as forests, because without forest, the timber industry wouldn't exist. But when if you want to plant a soya plantation or a palm oil plantation, that means you fell the forest. So potentially there's an opportunity there to differentiate the timber industry and the forestry industry. Again, that's probably more of an observation.
That would be very good.
Yeah.
I think it'll also happen. It might just take some time until this is being taken as a ambassador for, so to speak, for using more timber and also applying more timber.
Yep.
Yeah. Nils, thank you ever so much.
It's been great. Thank you.
Really, really grateful for your time. And
Likewise.
Yeah.
Likewise.
So, so long as you're happy, we'd love to have you back on in the future. So. So long as you're happy with that, we'd be delighted.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for the opportunity.
No problem.
Yeah, I would totally embrace that. Yeah.
Good.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going to wrap up, and we'll see you soon. But thanks once again, Nils. Really appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Thanks to you, Keith and Mike. I appreciated having the opportunity.
Cheers
Great.
for now.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.